about 5 years ago, I was preaching through a sermon series. In fact, it was right after we moved into this building because we were still meeting in the cafeteria, like a handful of you remember when our church was that small, and we could fit in our current lobby for church. And I was preaching through a series, and one of the sermons in that series was about the book of Ecclesiastes, and I mentioned that at that time I didn't really feel like I was old enough to fully appreciate the book of Ecclesiastes, because I think that some books of the Bible should come with age restriction on them, or at least we're not really interested in them, or we don't get them until we've lived enough life. For example, if you read the book of Proverbs, you don't really appreciate the Proverbs until you've lived long enough to learn the hard way that half of them are true, and then you want to learn the other half the easy way, so I think I'll read this book. That suddenly seems interesting to me. Or the book Song of Solomon. That's one kids shouldn't be allowed to read until they're married, because that's like the 50 Shades of Grey book of the Bible. Some of you are like, that's in there? You're getting out your Bible app reading Song of Solomon right now. But when I, as a younger man, would read the book of Ecclesiastes, I could understand it, I could get it, here's the main point, here's what it's saying, but at the same time, there's a certain genius to it, there's a certain brilliance to it that I felt like I couldn't appreciate being younger in life. So I mentioned in the sermon, offhandedly realized, when I turn 40, I'd like to preach through this book of the Bible. Now, the weird thing is, whenever I preach, I'm pretty sure you don't remember 98% of what I'm saying. But for some reason, everyone in the room remembered the fact that I said that. And over the years, as it's come up in conversation, people ask me about it. For example, a few months ago, I was over at the Y and I was finishing my workout. And someone who goes to Hope walked into the Y. She was starting her workout. And we were just talking a little bit, and the subject of age came up. And she asked me if I was 40 yet. And we've been in a small group together before, so if you've been in a small group with someone, you can just go anywhere, like right away, like, how old are you? Are you pregnant? No, you can just ask those questions when you've been in a group together that you normally wouldn't ask in polite company. So she said, when do you turn, are you 40 yet? I said, no, I turned 40 this summer. She said, so are you preaching Ecclesiastes? I said, I am, but I can't decide if I want to do 4 weeks or 12 weeks because there's 12 chapters in the book and you can really get into it. There's so much there. And she said, well, do you want people to come to church? So today I'm beginning a 4-week series on the book of Ecclesiastes because this month I turn 40 years old. Now, people are saying that... Didn't really do much to accomplish that one, but thank you. People say that 40 is the new 30. Have you heard that? It's not. It is not. 40 is the new 70. I am a tired old man, but I'll tell you what, I'm starting to appreciate the book of Ecclesiastes. I think I'm starting to get it now. So starting today in the next 3 weeks, we're going to hit the main points of the book of Ecclesiastes. We're not going to go into all the depths of it. Maybe when I turn 50, we'll come back around and we'll have a 12-week series, maybe. But if you ask my kids, they will tell you that when Dad says maybe, you can translate that as absolutely not, no chance. So maybe when I turn 50, we'll come back around and do a 12-week series on Ecclesiastes. But my hope for you is that as we read through this, the main points, the highlights of this book of the Bible, maybe for you it'll pique some interest, and regardless of your age, it'll prompt you to go and check it out for yourself, because it really is a brilliant piece of literature by any way that you measure it. Now, the challenging thing is it's not the easiest piece of literature to understand. It really is a unique book of the Bible. I remember when I was a kid growing up watching Sesame Street, they would have that one segment where they'd put the 4 objects on the screen, and 3 of them were similar, and one was completely different, and they would sing that song, one of these things is not like the others. So, raise your hand if you also had that growing up, okay? So one of these things is not like the others. Ecclesiastes is that thing, okay? Ecclesiastes is the weird kid in school. That's what Ecclesiastes is. He's the brilliant, eclectic, weird kid who quotes ancient Greek poets while pondering the meaning of life while the other children are eating crayons. That's Ecclesiastes. It's just this brilliant, brooding, eclectic thing where, much like you don't know how to approach a unique kid like that because he's so smart, maybe too smart for his own good, that's kind of how Ecclesiastes comes across, and people aren't really sure how to approach the book or what to make of it because it's such a unique piece of literature. Yet at the same time, many people who are not even Christians will praise it and recommend it and enjoy it. For example, in the book Moby Dick, Melville said that Ecclesiastes is the greatest piece of literature ever written. In fact, some of you have sung along with songs on the radio, and maybe you didn't even realize that the lyrics from that song were lifted directly from the book of Ecclesiastes. But at the same time, if someone were to read to you some verses from Ecclesiastes with no context whatsoever, they said, hey, just listen to this, and they read it, you might never guess that stuff like that was even in the Bible because it's just different. It doesn't sound like it's something that should be in the Bible. Now, there are a few reasons why it's challenging to read and understand. First of all, it's a very old piece of literature. This was written 2,900 years ago. So this is some wisdom from the ancient East, and it predates all of the Greek philosophers, the people we think were the forefathers and pioneers of philosophy in the Greek age, like Epimenides, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato. They were late to the game. They were trailing the book of Ecclesiastes by centuries, both in depth and in insight, yet people still study Ecclesiastes today because of the genius and the insights that it offers. It's also hard to track with because it rambles and wanders a little bit at times. It's not always the easiest piece of literature to track. Part of the reason is that's how life is. I mean, it's a book about life and studying life, and life isn't always an algebra equation. It's not always A plus B equals C. Life is a little bit random and a little bit chaotic, and it wanders a little bit, and the literature of the book definitely reflects how that works. But the main theme is why I'm interested in the book of Ecclesiastes, because what the book is all about at its core is this. It's about the meaning of life. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Is there even meaning in life is a question that comes up repeatedly in the book. And the reason why I think this series is worth the price of your attention, or rather I should say, the reason why I think Ecclesiastes is worth the price of your attention, is because this is the only place in the Bible where you will see an author answer this question from the perspective of a practical secularist. This isn't just someone who isn't sure whether God exists or who doubts whether God exists. It's a little beyond that. At the same time, it's not written from the perspective of a philosophical atheist. There are very few philosophical atheists, someone who goes to great philosophical depths in order to make an effort and argument to disprove the existence of God. This is from a practical secularist. A practical secularist is someone who says, there may be a God, there may not be a God, who knows? If there is, it's really hard to know if this is a good God or a loving God, but who really has time to figure all this out anyway? I have bills to pay and a family to raise and things to do, and in the end you die, and hey, that's probably just it anyway. And the reason why this is so helpful for us is because it captures the essence of the modern Western world. It captures the cultural sentiment of America today better than, perhaps, what is being written today about God. Yet, this man who wrote it all these centuries ago, this timeless wisdom, completely captured the essence of how we view God in America and how we explore the meaning of life today. Because it's written from the perspective of a secular atheist, God is hardly mentioned at all in the book. Not only is God hardly mentioned, we don't hear from God. God never speaks up. God never breaks through. The narrator never tells us what God is thinking or what's going on in heaven. It's one of two books in the Bible where God is completely silent. Because this is a man who is incredibly brilliant, wealthy, powerful, trying to discover on his own what is the meaning of life. Especially, he believed, since we can't know anything about a God. That's why I'm excited for this series. All right, you ready? I'll pretend you said yes. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, we meet the author right away. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, David had many sons. The one who became king in Jerusalem was a guy by the name of Solomon. Now, Solomon's life got off to a very interesting start. It's really like a soap opera beginning to his life. His father was the great and powerful King David, who established an empire in his day and age. And his mother, Bathsheba, was married to another man But when she had an affair with David, David had the other man killed so he could marry her. So imagine that in preschool for Solomon. He shows up on his first day of preschool. Well, tell us about your family, little guy. My daddy had my mommy's first husband killed so he could marry her. That's Solomon's background. That's his upbringing. Yet in spite of this, he grew up to be a remarkable man. Brilliant wisdom, brilliant intelligence, and became a very powerful man. He became king in Jerusalem. His power was so great, he reigned for 40 years, which was almost unprecedented in ancient times. He had incredible insight and wisdom. People would come from all over the world to ask him questions and get his perspective on life. And it wasn't just a few narrow categories like, here's how to rule a kingdom, or here's how to make more money for your kingdom. It was an incredible breadth of resources which he had remarkable depth on. He knew about science and botany and wealth and relationships, and romance, and trading. He knew all about so many various topics. He was the most powerful man in his generation. His army could defeat any army on the planet. He was the most wealthy man of his generation. We're told that during his reign, silver became valueless because there was so much gold. That's how wealthy he was. He had anything and anybody he wanted. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines, political arrangements. That means with all of his wives and concubines, he could have breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for a year with one of them and make it through the whole cycle once. No one was out of his reach. Nothing was out of his reach. Anything he wanted was his. And he says, I'm going to discover the meaning of life, and I'm going to leverage my incredible resources, my incredible knowledge, my incredible wisdom, my incredible power in order to find the meaning of life. And in his quest, he became both researcher and subject at the same time. I am going to go and find the meaning of life through achievement, through accomplishment, through pleasure, through success, through fame, through knowledge, through science. And that's what the book is all about. Now, for those of you like me who don't like to wait for the main point, just lay the main point out there in the front end and then tell us about it. That's what Solomon does. Right away in verse 2, he tells us the conclusion he reached. You ready for it? Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Okay, I've studied, I've researched, I've tried everything, I've done everything. Here's the conclusion I've reached about the meaning of life. It's meaningless. You say, Solomon, you don't really mean that, do you? Utterly meaningless, he says. Everything is meaningless. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? He says, I've researched the matter, and the conclusion I've reached is life is utterly meaningless. Now, meaningless is a very interesting Hebrew word. In fact, if you read different translations of the Bible, you'll find a lot of different translations for this word. Some say vanity. Some say empty or emptiness. The reason why there's different translations is because the literal Hebrew word is very easy to translate. It just doesn't seem to make sense here. The literal word means breath or vapor. Imagine you're out on a cold Wisconsin morning and you exhale and that puff appears and it dissipates and it's gone. Solomon said, here's the conclusion I've reached. Vapor. Vapor. It's utterly a vapor, he says. Now, the New Testament author who seemed to grasp and latch onto Solomon's writings, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, more than anyone else, was James. And I think he was studying Ecclesiastes the morning that he wrote these words. James said, "What is your life? You are a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Gone. A vapor. Meaningless." Solomon says, I've researched it all. You're a vapor. You're meaningless. He continues. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? What does a man gain? Yes, I see that hand, you in the back. A car. Oh, a car. That's what you gain for all your labor under the sun. Yeah, a car. Well, what do? I drive it. For how long? Till I get tired of it. Then what? I trade it in. For what? A car. Oh. So you're laboring for that car. Yeah, well, what do you do with the new one? I drive it. For how long? Till I get tired of it. Then what do? I trade it in for what? A car. Where do you go with your car? To work. Well, why do you drive it to work? I have to pay for my car. Well, what are you getting for your toil under the sun, he asks. Are you really getting ahead? He says, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. Here's what he's saying. You think you're unique. You think you're special. You think you're different. He says, but let me guess how the story of your life goes. Let me see if I'm close here. You were born. You went to preschool. You went to grade school, you went to middle school, you went to high school, and then you got a job or you went to college. And then if you went to college, then you caught up with all the other people who got a job. Then you tried to get married or you got married, and maybe you had a kid, maybe two, maybe three. Maybe you got divorced, maybe you got remarried. Then you retired, you played golf, got sick, and you died. Does that sound like anybody's life story to you? We're like, that's everyone's life story. It's meaningless, he says. And on the day you die, just so you know, Solomon says, do you know what everyone's going to do? On the day you die, they're going to go to work so they can buy their next car. It's meaningless. He continues. The sun rises and the sun sets, and it hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they returned again. Nothing's ever accomplished. Nothing's ever finished. Nothing is never satisfied in our world. It just goes round and round and round you go, and where you stop, well, it's in the grave, and then no one remembers you. Generations come and generations go, says Solomon. So his first conclusion that he presents the reader with as he's researched the meaning of life is this. Life is meaningless under the sun. It's a vapor, if you will, under the sun. It comes, it's gone, and it's like you were never even there. Say, that's totally bummer. It gets worse. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. In other words, what he's saying is your eye will never get to the place where it's had so much beauty. It says, I've had so much beauty, I'm good. I don't need to see anymore. The ears will never say, I've heard so much beautiful music, I never need to hear again. I'm good. There's no satisfaction. There's always a hunger and a thirst for more. He also says this, what has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. What he's saying is, you think you're hot, you think you're cool, you think you're clever, here's what you don't know. Someone else has already run a faster mile, amassed more wealth, married a prettier girl, preached a better sermon, built more buildings, built healthier gardens, developed breakthrough technology. But you think you're awesome sauce because we forgot about everything they accomplished. So here we are. Look how great our sermons are. Look how much wealth we've amassed. Look at how much life-changing technology we've developed. And Solomon says, yeah, and in 2 generations, you're going to be forgotten. That's not new stuff. Everybody's been doing that since the beginning of time. So here's his next point. Nothing is new under the sun. Nothing is new. What has been, we're just repeating it. Round and round. The sun goes up, the sun goes down. The streams flow to the ocean, comes back in rain, and flows back down again. We're just repeating cycles of history. That's all he says. It's random. It's not going anywhere. If you're not totally depressed yet, he's got more to say on this subject. And by the way, today's just an overview. I'm going to give you before you check out. I'm done. I'm just going to go take a nap. There's nothing left to live for. We're going to get the overview today, and then in the next 3 weeks, we're going to dig into these ideas and unpack them. He said, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. What he's saying is this, The fastest runner doesn't always win. The best team doesn't always win. The person who does everything right with their finances can still end up broke. And at the same time, the person who's wicked, the person who cheats, sometimes they get ahead and they're doing just fine in life. Life isn't always fair. Life isn't always A plus B equals C. Sometimes life is a little bit random, he says. But time and chance happen to them all. Why is life the way it is? I don't know. It's just random. It's just chaos. It's just time. It's just chance. But Solomon, I did everything right, and my life's a mess. I know, that's life. It's meaningless. His point is this. Life is random under the sun. It's meaningless, it's vapor. There's nothing new, and it gets pretty random under the sun. But a couple chapters later, he says something interesting. Ecclesiastes 11. He finally gets to a good verse. Be happy. Well, who's not feeling happy reading Ecclesiastes? Of course. Be happy, young man, while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Now check this out. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see. Some of you are like, finally, I found a life verse. I can do that. Whatever my heart wants, whatever my eyes see, I'm just going to go for it. What did Jason preach about? He said, follow your heart, and now I have a Bible verse. This is great. I'm going to be so happy. But the verse isn't done. There's a second half to this verse about being happy. But know that for all these things, God will bring you to judgment. So Solomon says, hey, have a great time. Go party. Have fun. But God's going to judge you for that. Yeah, just remember that while you're out partying next weekend. Have a great time. Whatever your heart wants, whatever your eyes see, go for it. But God's going to judge you. He continues, next verse. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Now remember the connection. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Be happy. You're going to get judged. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Before the days of trouble come. What are the days of trouble? He explains in great detail. And the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark. In other words, he says, before your vision starts to fade and the clouds return after the rain, before your hair turns white, I'm working on it already, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, when you start to shake and you just can't stop and your shoulders, your back start to get stooped over, when the grinders, your teeth, cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when your intellect isn't as sharp as it was before, when the doors to the street are closed and the sound of grinding fades, when people rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint. Any noise wakes me up, but I can't even really articulate the song the birds are singing. And the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. Here's what he's saying, in case you missed it. Go out while you're young, have a great time, because the day's going to come in your life when you get old enough that you hate the reality that you woke up today, because your life is miserable, and then you die. So, either you die young and you're judged, or you get old enough that you hate life, and then you die, and then you're judged. Good luck. Be happy. But if you pay attention to what he's saying, I mean really pay attention, what you see begins to unlock the genius and the brilliance of this eclectic book of the Bible. He said, be happy, young man, while you are young. And then in the next verse he said, remember your Creator in your youth. Connect the dots. What's he saying? What he's saying is this: human beings have a happiness problem. Not that we don't pursue happiness, we constantly pursue happiness. Our problem is that we don't know how to attain happiness. We don't know how to achieve and keep and hang on to happiness. We grab it and then it slips right out of our grasp as soon as we seem to grab it. He says the reason why is because you are not remembering your Creator in your pursuit of happiness. You are looking for happiness where? Under the sun. Meaningless occurs 38 times in this book. Under the sun pops up 27 times, and it's the only book of the Bible where you find it. You have a happiness problem because the final source of your happiness, he says, is under the sun. And under the sun, it's a vapor. And under the sun, it's random. And under the sun, there's nothing unique or special or new. So you have a happiness problem in that you're looking for happiness in all the wrong places. In Romans chapter 1, Paul writes about this problem that we have with our happiness. He says, ultimately, every human on the planet, every person is a worshiper of something. We either worship the Creator that Solomon mentioned here, or we worship something he created. We either worship, serve, love, find fulfillment, meaning joy in the Creator, or we look to something He created or someone He created in order to find purpose, meaning joy, satisfaction in life. And he says, as long as you try to find your meaning under the sun, your identity under the sun, your purpose under the sun, your joy under the sun, your happiness under the sun, your significance under the sun, meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. But what if we began to look somewhere different for our happiness? And very subtly, he introduced a brand new category that took him 12 chapters in the book to get to. Meaningless under the sun, meaningless under the sun, meaningless under the sun. What about beyond the sun? What about the Creator? See, do you know who lives beyond the sun? Jesus lives beyond the sun. And Jesus, who lives beyond the sun, looked at our futility of life under the sun, in our toil and in our sin and in our guilt and in our shame. And because He loved us with an everlasting love, He came to live under the sun with us. But His life was not meaningless. His life was not lived for life under the sun. His life under the sun was lived so that you could have life beyond the sun. He lived His life for you. He died on the cross for you to give you redemption from life under the sun, to liberate you from a life that is only lived for life under the sun, but to give you a destiny beyond the sun, to give you an eternity beyond the sun, to give you a life beyond the sun, to give you a meaning beyond the sun, to give you purpose beyond the sun. In fact, I love how Solomon said it in chapter 3. He said, He has made everything beautiful in its time. Do you know what that means? It means there is a time in which God will make everything meaningful. There is a time when He will make everything beautiful. There is a time when the brokenness of your life will be healed. There is a time when the sorrow in your life will be turned into laughter. There is a time when your heartache in life will be turned into joy. There will be a time when your body is resurrected and made new and outfitted for eternal life, and you will look upon the beauty and glory and holiness of Jesus. And everything will be made beautiful. You, the people you love, this broken world, everything will be made beautiful, he says. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men. Pause. He has planted eternity in your heart. This is not a theological thing even. This is just a human being thing. Did you know that every culture in our planet before our American Western culture has intuitively understood that there is a life beyond this life? Now, it might not be the right answer of what life beyond this life looks like, but something in their heart says, I know there is something beyond this life. Solomon says it's because God set eternity into your heart, that you would know Him, that you would seek Him, that you would look for Him, that you would crave Him. Okay? And you can't have a bad church experience and all of a sudden this reality leaves your heart. It's still there. And you can't be mad at the preacher and get rid of this reality. It's still there. God set eternity in your heart so that we would be wise and not look for meaning in life under the sun. He set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to when? From beginning to... We're not done yet. See, life under the sun is random. God is beyond the sun, and He says, I'm not done yet. There's a conclusion to all of this. There is a bookend to all of this under the sun. And all the events, I'm shaping them to lead to the destination when Jesus comes back. Wickedness is done away with forever, and my people will inherit eternal life. You've got to look from beginning to end. You're only looking under the sun, and when you only look under the sun, life is meaningless. Look beyond the sun. Look beginning to end. So here's our last fill in the blank. There's more to life than under the sun. Under the sun is too small a thing to live for. Under the sun is too small a thing to hope in. Solomon leads us to the conclusion: live for something greater than under the sun. Live for beyond the sun. Only then can you begin to find meaning and satisfaction in your life. Now, we're just getting started. Next week, we're going to really start getting into some details. This is just the overview of the entire book. But the question for you for next week is this: how content am I to search for meaning under the sun? And how's that search going? Just you all by yourself. You don't need to tell anyone your answers to this question. This is just for you. How content am I searching for meaning in life under the sun? And if I can be honest with myself, how's that search going? Next week, we're going to discover in detail why a search for meaning under the sun isn't going to get you where you want to be. So we'll pick it up there next Sunday. Let me pray for you. Father in heaven, thank you for preserving this amazing ancient literature from the hand of Solomon. Thank you for this insight because it is so fresh and relevant for us to consider today. As we listen to and consider these words, Father, will you give us your wisdom? You promise in the book of James that when we ask for wisdom, you will give it to us because you love for us to walk with wisdom. So give us your wisdom to see this reality, that life under the sun doesn't have meaning, so that we can see how we've been foolishly living for life under the sun and how we can live for life beyond the sun. Jesus, thank you for redeeming us from meaningless lives. Thank you for giving us a hope for life beyond the sun. Thank you for giving us a purpose beyond under the sun. So give us wisdom to know what this looks like in our lives. Give us the courage to trust you and put it into practice. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.